With the 2024 NBA season coming to a close, it's time to rank the game's best players. The question I'm answering is, if I'm trying to contend for a championship, who's gonna offer the most value at that level? For a more in-depth look at everything that went into making the list, and a full breakdown of my criteria, make sure to check out episode 1. I'll leave a link to that in the description. And without wasting any more of your time, let's continue with the list. At number 20, I've got the rookie Victor Wembanyama. This was a really tough one to rank for a wide variety of reasons, and the guy had such an eventful season that I don't even know where to start. Well, he finished second in Defensive Player of the Year voting, so that's probably the best place. We can keep this short and sweet because I think everyone already knows where the value comes from. He's huge, he's agile, his timing and hands are impeccable, and that led to one of the best shot blocking seasons we've ever seen. He took a team of borderline disastrous defenders and actually made them look competent, posting a near 5-point defensive swing in the process. However, I think the rookie flaws are still pretty obvious and separate him from a guy like Gobert when it comes to shutting off the paint. His positioning can be a bit off at times, especially in drop coverage, and he's not very disciplined, meaning he has a tendency to bite on every move or fake an offensive player throws at him. That's also what hurts him out in space, as he's already somewhat awkward due to the massive frame, and he'll overreact to something as simple as a hesitation. For these reasons, I don't think he can yet be considered as the best defender in basketball. Still, the one-of-one physical tools are impossible to overlook. His length warps the geometry of the court, he's fluid like a forward, and he makes plays that you could argue nobody else in NBA history is capable of making. For those reasons, I think he's an all-star caliber player on defense alone, worthy of being argued as a top 5 or so defender in the game. On the offensive side is where things get really interesting, and evaluating his strengths and weaknesses becomes a lot more difficult. That's because of the situation he's in. It's clear to me that he's already capable of being maybe the best play finisher in the game, yet he doesn't play with any true high-level creators or playmakers that can take advantage of it. I'd love to see him next to an elite pick-and-roll ball handler, maximizing him as a lob threat, short roll weapon, really just getting him the ball with an advantage inside of 15 feet. Because they don't have that, he's oftentimes forced into the role of a lead creator, and that's where his weaknesses come to light. His handle is loose, courtesy of being the tallest player in the league, and he's in a very experimental stage of figuring out what works as a passer, which is why he was second in the NBA at nearly 4 turnovers a game. However, with the ball in his hands, he was also able to showcase what makes him an alien. For starters, he made 37.5% of his off-the-dribble threes on volume, which is absolutely terrifying. And while it has been a case of trial and error, some of the passes he's already capable of making, especially with a live dribble, are a total game changer. If we look at his scoring numbers, they don't jump off the screen but are actually pretty close to what we saw with De'Aaron Fox last video, and that's while not having his biggest strength maximized, and including his not so up to par start of the season. That's what makes it tough, because it's hard to draw a line between what he's forced to do as a result of playing on a losing team, or what he does that would actually hurt a contender. He was one of the worst catch-and-shoot players in the league, yet took them at a high rate, and the same goes for his mid-range shooting, but with a better supporting cast, he could just be unleashed as a rim runner who doesn't even have to handle the ball, which sounds like a nightmare to deal with. Which is why, in my opinion, he is still a pretty clear positive on the offensive side of the ball, but not quite some huge juggernaut or centerpiece just yet. When paired with the defense, that's enough to get into an All-NBA level and number 20 on the list. As for number 19, that spot goes to Kyrie Irving. Kyrie's in a really interesting spot in his career where it feels like he's no longer the explosive volume scorer he once was, but he's molded his game and mastered the little things to still bring an immense impact. He's no longer as agile as he once was, and I think that stood out in the finals where he struggled to beat those tougher defenders off the dribble. His style of driving was already very slithery, so low free throw rates have only gotten lower, meaning that most of his scoring is reliant on jump shooting. The thing is, he's one of the best jump shooters ever. Over the past 3 seasons, he's hit almost 40% of his pull-up threes, which is absurd, and he's arguably even better in the mid-range with a versatile range of shots that includes everything from turnaround fadeaways to floaters with the offhand. There's just one problem, and that's the fact that probably the most valuable thing an offensive player can do is create easy shots for himself. Kyrie's tough shot making is absurd, but he doesn't create a lot of easy looks for himself at this point, and I think that's why his scoring volume in the playoffs has looked considerably worse than in the regular season for a few years in a row now. When you aren't creating easy shots for yourself, the defense doesn't have to react as much, and that in turn has hurt his ability to make plays for others. That's not to say he isn't still an elite creator, just that I think it's noticeably regressed from where he was at a few years ago, and for that reason, there are a lot of guys who I'd prefer as a number 1, building my offense around. However, where I get really high on Kyrie is with what he's capable of doing as a number 2, pretty much the ideal supporting offensive player. He's one of the best catch and shoot guys in the league, someone who can't be left open for even a second, and he's also one of the most decisive attackers, meaning he'll absolutely torch closeouts or a rotating defense as an off-the-catch weapon. That's what made the pairing work so well with Luka, maximizing his touches, not trying to do too much, and moving the ball around without turning it over, quite literally everything you want in that supporting role. Then he can imitate a number 1 for extended stretches with the bench unit as a sort of lead creator due to the pull-up shooting and playmaking, and it's the role flexibility that, to me, still makes him an all-NBA level offensive player. As for the defense, he's kind of all over the place, meaning you'll have really good and really questionable moments. The Clippers series was the best defense I've ever seen him play. The activity, the communication, his ability to stay in front of the ball and blow up everything with his hands, he truly looked like a great defender. But as the postseason went on, we started to see some more of his limitations, like the fact that he lacks height, length, and strength, which hurt his ability to match up with wings or bigger guards, and also how he tends to have a lot of lapses against offenses that emphasize movement, whether that's missing a rotation, losing a cutter, just the types of breakdowns that hurt the worst. Still, I like his positive defensive tools enough, especially the effort and activity, that I don't think he's a detriment in most situations. I feel more comfortable labeling him as a neutral type of defender, and of the 31 players that I considered for a spot on this list, his impact in the playoffs actually looks like an outlier, having both the highest net rating and highest net swing of any player. To me, he's still an all-NBA caliber guy at this point in his career, and number 19 on this list. At number 18, we've got another notable number 2 with Bam Adebayo. Yet another year goes by where I feel like Bam is overwhelmingly the most underrated player in basketball. His best attribute as a player pretty much goes without saying, the defensive versatility. He's a rare breed of defender who can switch 1 through 5, execute every single pick and roll coverage, maximize a zone. I mean, he's basically the ultimate defensive chess piece that the league has to offer. He's always been an incredibly smart help defender as well, shutting off driving lanes and blowing up actions by putting himself in the right spot on the floor, which has resulted in a spot on 5 straight all-defensive teams. That versatility came with a trade-off though. He just simply wasn't the biggest presence around the rim, meaning that guys who could penetrate the Miami defense didn't have too much trouble scoring with him there. However, to me, this felt like the year where he finally took his paint protection to the next level, checking the final box and making him an ultimate defensive weapon. I still wouldn't say he's near the best rim protectors in the league, but he's more of a presence and much better in drop coverage, which to me is enough to make him one of the 3 or 4 best defenders in the game, adding strong all-star type of value on that end of the floor alone. In addition to that, I also think he took an offensive leap this year. I've always felt his best skills aren't maximized on the Heat due to their lack of an elite pick and roll ball handler. He's an amazing screener, a big time threat as a roller who can get above the rim, stop short for mid-range jumpers, or make the right extra passes to counter aggressive defense. That passing is what's always made him unique, as he can initiate like an offensive hub when needed, with the handle and inside the arc scoring to serve as a release valve. Where I think he took a leap though is with the growth of his low post game. He was legitimately one of the best post scorers in the NBA this season, which really stood out against Boston in the first round as he torched them with a ridiculous display of tough shot making. That tough shot making comes as a result of tough shot taking though, and in a similar vein to Kyrie, this holds him back a bit. He struggles to generate easy shots for himself, relying on others to create opportunities around the basket for him, and that's why when you stack him up against other centers, he just simply doesn't have the same type of efficiency. For that reason, I don't think he's quite an offensive star, but still bringing some real positive value. When paired with the elite defense, that's enough to make him an all-NBA level player and number 18 on this list. His teammate, Jimmy Butler, joins him at the number 17 spot. Jimmy's a tough one because we didn't get to see him in the playoffs, and usually that's where he shows his true colors. All we have to go off for this year is the regular season, and when comparing it to past regular seasons, I think there's a little bit of regression. Let's start with his interior scoring. If we look at his volume of attempts at the rim each year, this was the lowest mark he recorded since back when he was playing for the Bulls. The efficiency wasn't much better, shooting his lowest percentage at the rim since his year with the Timberwolves. Rim pressure and free throws were always his two biggest points of scoring pressure, and as a result of lower interior scoring numbers, his free throw rates were the lowest they've been since he played for the Sixers. That's three very noticeable regressions, and while I think you could say he just simply coasted the regular season more than he already does, it just simply made him a less valuable offensive player than in years past. With all of that said though, it's important to not only compare him to himself, but the rest of the league as well. While down, his rim and free throw volume are still incredibly good marks, and he pairs that with a strong in-between game, efficient playmaking, and a vast off-ball arsenal that still turns him into a very good offensive player. The lack of three-point shooting hurts, and I'm still not sure how I feel about him being an offensive centerpiece, but I'd love to see him play off of a true primary creator because I absolutely love his ability to just play completely different roles on any given possession. In my opinion, he's an all-star level offensive player at this stage in his career, and what takes him to the next level is his two-way capability. Most of that value is driven from the fact that he's maybe the best off-ball defensive wing we've ever seen. His activity, positioning as a helper, ability to jump passing lanes and just blow up everything with his hands are able to completely warp the dynamic of opposing offenses. But again, this didn't feel as prominent as in years past. And for the first time since 2016, he didn't even force 2 turnovers every 75 possessions. Still, I absolutely love him as a defensive wing in the playoffs. He rarely ever makes mistakes, can pretty much switch across the board as needed because of his agility, strength, and explosive 2-foot leaping, which still makes him an all-defensive caliber guy by my estimation. All-star type of offense, while being an all-defensive type of player, is enough to get him to an all-NBA level overall and the number 17 spot. That takes us to number 16, where I have Zion Williamson. After that play-in game against the Lakers, I finally thought we'd get to witness playoff Zion, only for him to go down with yet another injury. But don't let his inability to stay on the floor distract you from what he's capable of doing while on it. He's simply one of the most physically imposing players we've ever seen. The explosiveness, the strength, the left to right agility, and how he pairs that with a shockingly tight handle have all turned him into one of the highest volume interior scorers in league history. And typically, guys with that much power and explosion rely on that to finish, but he's got some freakish touch and versatility in the types of angles he'll go to, so no matter how much a defense packs the paint, he's gonna find a way to create good shots for himself. That's turned him into a huge advantage creator. The entire defense has to shift towards him every single time he touches the ball, and while he's far from an elite passer, he's still a pretty good one, so he consistently puts his teammates in really good situations to play off the catch. Sure, he lacks some versatility due to the fact that he can't really shoot outside of 6 to 7 feet, but if you remember what I said about Kyrie, I think the most valuable trait an offensive player can have is the ability to generate easy shots for himself. If he's not scoring at the rim, he's probably drawing a foul, and if you put the ball in his hands, he can be the centerpiece to a really elite offense. But then he also has the off-ball game. He can screen and roll, he has incredibly high feel for filling out space or timing up cuts, he'll attack space off the catch, and he'll get on the offensive glass for second chance opportunities, so in my opinion, he's one of the easiest players in the league to build an offense around. With that said, he is a little bit tougher to build a defense around because of his awkward fit in most lineups. He's not agile or fluid enough to defend in space, but he's also undersized when it comes to defending bigs, so there typically isn't an ideal matchup for him on the floor, which is something that I think would cause some real problems in a deep playoff run. They usually try to let him play free safety, where he can rely on his freakish athleticism to just make things happen, whether that's jumping a lane, meeting someone at the rim, and there's real value in just simply being a big athletic forward. However, he's not a great processor, so he'll miss some of the less obvious rotations, and he's prone to breakdowns, so instead of being a game changer when roaming, it feels like more of a strategy to keep him away from the ball. I think he's improved positionally from past years, so he's not a huge detriment, but I would still label him a noticeable negative for the time being, thinking about it from more of a playoff perspective. That brings him back to earth from the mega offensive value, but still to a strong All-NBA level overall, and in my opinion, the 16th best player in basketball. Just to recap this installment of the list, we've got Zion at 16, Jimmy at 17, Bam at 18, Kyrie at 19, and Wembanyama at 20. Make sure to tune into tomorrow's video for the next 5 players. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the list so far. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.